Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our community. What did they do to get started, and what are they doing to stay there? Here we are, season 6, Q1, and I have another special guest for you today as I'm bringing Tenice Wehmeyer to you, and I can't wait for this conversation. Tenice is an executive coach. She's a leadership consultant. She's a speaker at Wehmeyer Leadership Coaching. And Denise, it's so good to have you on the show. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Bruce. Thanks for having me.
So we were talking, it's been a while since we've seen each other, but I always like to start the show reflecting on the first time I met my guests, or maybe they came into my path. There's been a few guests that I hadn't met before, and I met them through books or through speaking appearances. But for you, see if we can go back here. Dallas HR, I was serving, I think I was a committee member at the time, and we were both serving in Dallas HR. I want to say it was around 2008, 2009, and you might have been at McAfee at the time. Do you remember that?
I was 2006
Oh
actually.
my goodness, because I
So
started in
almost,
2005.
yep,
So
almost 20 years ago.
almost 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that organization really shaped my career on my journey. That was really great. And then I think you left there, and then did you move at that time?
I did. And the reason I knew it was six instead of eight is when I moved. So
Oh,
I left the Dallas Fort Worth area and moved just north of San Antonio and have been there ever since. But we then met at the South Texas HR Summit that is typically hosted, obviously, in the South Texas area,
hmm.
and the one in San Antonio, I think just pre-COVID.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've got to speak there a couple times. I've done a breakout. I've done a keynote. That's a fantastic conference. Oh my goodness, I cannot wait to get into this conversation. Before we do, though, I would love for people to know. I mentioned that you really do a lot of things around Wehmeyer leadership coaching. I would love for you to share, just share a little bit about the organization that you are serving and how you serve your customers.
Bruce, it was interesting because when I first went into business for myself, I spent 20 years in corporate HR and leadership and organizational development.
Yeah.
And when I first started my business, I thought I was going to do one-on-one coaching. I mean, that was what my vision was just all this one-on-one coaching. And as it continued to morph and figure out where my passion was and what I really enjoyed, it became really working with executive leadership teams. So those small intact teams that are critical to the success of an organization. And so what I do a lot is working with those teams to first build cohesiveness, make sure that they're not infighting and broken in
Mhm.
silos and in it for themselves, because unfortunately that happens sometimes. So really building those behaviors that help that team be one team, and then moving to creating organizational alignment and clarity that can permeate down throughout the organization so the entire organization can be focused on delivering results collectively and together versus working against one another.
I love that. And we're going to get into all things leadership. I did read you as one of your goals on, I think it might have been on, I'm not sure if it was LinkedIn or I saw it on one of your flyers, but to develop self-awareness and design leadership journey. And so we're going to get into all that. But before we do, I would love to hear like the Tenice Wehmeyer story. Like I mentioned, we met in Dallas HR, but let's go back before that. Like, where did you grow up? And how in the world did you get into leadership and coaching?
Well, I actually grew up in a small West Texas town, in a farming community. My dad was a cotton farmer, and so I grew up in this very small community. And there's kind of two people in small rural communities like that: those that will stay forever, and those that just have this desire and passion to kind of, you know, get the hell out of Dodge per se. And that was me. I mean, I wanted to do bigger and different things. And so, quickly moved to San Antonio, moved to Dallas and Fort Worth. So lived in some of those bigger cities. And then actually kind of just fell into the HR world.
Mm.
And my passion for helping people made that a nice spot to land. And so I spent the first half of my career in human resources, the traditional HR business partner, employee relations, those type of things. And about the middle of my career, I transitioned to really focusing on leadership development
Mm.
and helping leaders be more effective. I can clearly remember sitting in my HR cube. I was in a
Mm.
cube in the office. You mentioned earlier that we had met at McAfee, or when I was working for McAfee, and I remember clearly sitting in that cube. And unfortunately, I was dealing with employee relations issues, kind of one right after the other.
Mm.
And a lot of those came down to the relationship between the employee and their leader. And so I thought, we've got to figure this out. And I decided that we needed to back up and get in front of the problem and try to be a little more proactive. And so at the time, we had a chief learning officer and we had a sales learning organization, but that was kind of it, just our sales training.
Mm.
And so I went to our chief learning officer and I said, what do you think about doing something more intentional with leadership development to help our leaders be more effective, to give them the skills that they need in order to lead our people to deliver the results that we're looking for? And so that kind of made my leap
Mm.
into really focusing on our people, but focusing on them from a different perspective.
I love all of that. And first of all, like I don't, where did that come from? Like actually, like a lot of people think about doing things, but you actually said, "Hey, what do you think about it if we actually get in front of this? What would that look like?" Where did that come from?
I think it really, maybe indirectly, but I just think it comes down from my core of wanting to help others be better.
Mm.
And it is this, desire to create, I talk about creating harmony, which, if I had a magic wand, the thing that I would do is wave it and there would be harmony in the world and homes across, the world everywhere. I'm a realist. I
Mm.
realize that's, magic wands don't necessarily, they're not real. But I think it's just that desire and that passion internally to truly help others be more effective.
No, I appreciate you saying that. If you're taking notes right now, write down magic wand. I think that, like, I just wrote that down. I'm like, that's something I think we all think about in our organizations. We think like we should do this or we should consider this, but we don't actually tell anybody or push it through. I love all that. Okay, so fast forward. I want to know about this transition from you transition from eventually from the corporate side into your own business. Talk about that. Like, what was that like?
When I was in leadership development, I loved 90% of what I did,
Yeah.
which I think is, maybe most people. But I really loved helping the leaders, coaching the leaders, and working with teams be more effective and collaborate more effectively. And so I had this vision or this goal that that's what I wanted to do 100% of the time. So being able to really go out and not just help the organization that I was in, not just, whatever company I was working for, but be able to help a lot of times even smaller companies that don't have the internal resources to
Mm.
have leadership development programs or coaching programs or even assessments, 360s, performance management, all of those type of things. Sometimes organizations just aren't large enough, or they don't have the bandwidth internally.
Mm.
And so being able to do that with different companies within, my sphere of influence, I've done it both locally here in the South Texas area. I come to Dallas, Fort Worth a lot and work there. I've worked from coast to coast, actually. So really being able to kind of control my own destiny and build that business which is really one of the things that was a vision for me, is to be able to have a business and grow it, and not just for myself, but even for my family and for others.
I always like to talk about, when we find our lane, we find our purpose, we find our calling, just work feels different. Our life just feels different. Was there a moment, or were there moments when, because I mean, transitioning into a new business, yes, it was a vision, yes, it was your dream, but a lot of times those dreams take a long time, and there's a lot of failure along the way, and there's a lot of doubt along the way, and there's success along the way. There's all these different things, but there are moments when we're like, you know what, I found this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my career. Was there a moment?
I think probably the moment was when I engaged with an executive team that was dysfunctional, that
Mm,
had some infighting, and went through that process in order to help them realize where they're different, where their work styles and priorities are different, and how they could work together for that common goal.
mm,
And seeing the success of them begin to work together, and then also creating that the vision and the alignment and the clarity that they shared lower in their organization to really help the organization deliver higher results. And I think that's, I talked a little bit earlier about, thinking that that one-on-one coaching was what I was getting into. But when I had that happen with my first executive team,
mm.
that's when I really knew that it was more that small group executive team coaching that I wanted to focus on. That's my lane.
Oh my goodness, this is so good. And it really all falls back to what you said before. It's all about helping people. And you have found that lane where you can really help people and help teams and really create just goodness all the way around. I love that. I always like to just mention mentors. I mean, there's surely there were some people that have helped you along the way. It's hard to do it ourselves. I don't know, maybe share a couple of people, and maybe they weren't mentors, maybe they were sponsors or business partners, but who were a couple of people that have helped you on your journey, and what was it that made it so helpful?
Yeah, it was interesting as I was reflecting on this question. I think earlier in my career, I potentially had mentors, but I didn't even realize they were mentors.
Hmm.
Just maybe even bosses and people that would give me advice and I would look up to. But it was about the middle of my career when I really started looking at. I talked about building that leadership and organizational development team. And I remember some very specific people. I built our executive coaching program, and Brian Underhill is one of the executive coaching consultants that really helps organizations build executive coaching programs. And so Brian really helped me from the aspect of understanding what's important to organizations and why it's important to have a structured coaching program. And so that was one. And then everywhere from we built a 360, we customized our 360 assessment program. And so I would find people, experts in these vendors that we were bringing in to help us, but I would find an expert in each one of those organizations that really they knew the ins and outs of that piece of the industry, and really build a relationship with them in order to learn absolutely as much as I could. And there's been other people in different companies. I've had executive coaches that have been in the industry many years longer than I had, that I connected to. Gail McDonald was one of them. And I connected with her, and she really helped me think about how I would, you know, structure my business and what I wanted to do. And then what's interesting is today, and since my business started, most of my mentors are a lot of the colleagues and consultants. I remember calling you, Bruce, and talking about you write all the time. And I'm like, I'm not a writer. How do you do it? And we had a great conversation. And so I think about just my, other coaches and consultants that are really mentors to me. And then I obviously have my own business coach, a strategic advisor that helps me. So there's never too many people
Mm.
out there that can help you grow and develop where you need to.
There's never too many people. Oh my goodness, I love that quote. I what I as you're telling me this though, one thing that really strikes me is that there's once again, there's something about trying to do it yourself. And then there's another thing to actually reach out to different people. Yes, I do remember you reaching out and us having a conversation when I was writing my blog and my books and different things like that. You reached out to coaches. I love that. Talk about like it takes time though, doesn't it? And so, the value of like reaching out, and I'm assuming you still reach out today when you have challenges. I don't know, for those listening, there's people listening right now. They're like, oh man, these are such good ideas. How did you do it? Like, did you just say, hey, I'm going to block some time. I'm just going to make this happen? I don't know, just a tip for someone listening.
One of the things that I talk about with my leaders in every aspect is you have to be thoughtful and intentional about your actions.
Mm.
And this is another space that you have to be thoughtful and intentional about your development. And so scheduling that time, and to your point, thinking about it, feeling like you're struggling with something, and knowing I can get there faster and figure it out faster if I maybe spend those few minutes having a couple of important conversations versus continuing just to spin and try to figure it out yourself. Because a lot of times that
Yeah.
doesn't work and you're stuck for a reason. And, any good coach knows that someone asking you, powerful questions and helping you unlock what's inside of you already
Mm.
is the way to move forward more quickly.
So
And,
good.
and so that's what I say. I'll also tell you that, there's sometimes I'll get to where, I have somebody and we get on this recurring, calendar schedule and it's,
Mm.
it's just a connection and that works, but then sometimes that can turn into we're just friends having a conversation. That's not always valuable for your time. And so
Mm.
you have to balance what is the value of the time that we're spending together? Is it really making a difference? Or does that need to go in my friend category where, maybe I'm just relaxing over a glass of wine and we're talking about something a little more casual? And so you have to differentiate those things.
That's great advice. I love that. One of the things I do like to ask on my show, I like to ask my guests, leadership comes in a lot of different people define it in a lot of different ways. If someone said, hey, Denise, what is leadership to you? How would you define that?
There's a couple of things, and one, I will always go back first to you think about a mentor, maybe not directly, but someone I've followed for years is John Maxwell.
Mm.
And so John Maxwell's quote is leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less.
Mm.
And I will, stand behind that 100%. It's not about the title you have, it's not about the office or where you fall in that org chart. It really is the influence that you have on others. And when you have the behaviors and the practices and you're delivering the results that makes people want to follow you, you become a leader because others want to follow you because of the things that you're doing, even maybe a base level. And I think that becomes more critical when you get to where people are following you because they want to, not because they have to.
Mm.
If they have to follow you because, you're their boss, you may not even be an effective leader. But once they're following you because they want to, that's when you start to have that powerful influence and your leadership effectiveness is working in your favor.
Hey, let me ask you this. Whenever people, leaders, companies are reaching out to you, Denise, and they're saying, hey, listen, we need your help. We've got this challenge. Are there some common challenges that you typically will hear in your line when it comes to leadership development, or are they just random? Talk about that for a second.
I'm going to answer that in two different ways. Because when you think about leadership, it's hard. And in today's pressure packed workplace, we are dealing with hybrid, remote, in person, multiple generations, regardless of what your generation, our generation is as a leader. We have at least probably four other generations that we're working with in the workplace, not to mention the priorities, the difference in work styles, communication styles.
Mm.
And for leaders, that's a lot to juggle. So, how do I figure out how to juggle all of that? In addition, most leaders are also delivering part of the results. I mean, they're not just sitting back being a leader, they've got responsibilities to, deliver as well. And so juggling all of that gets really difficult. But to answer your question directly, what I do in a lot of my first engagements with my clients is what I call a culture audit or a culture assessment,
Mm.
and be able to go in and speak with different people, maybe even some focus groups, maybe some one-on-ones, to really figure out what is going on inside the walls of that organization. How functional are they? What are the relationships? What is the communication? What internal development do they have to offer? And what are they missing? Where are those gaps? And so it's this assessment to really help them see, okay, here's where I think we should start
Mm.
based on where your organization is today. Because there's some common things. Maybe a leader is missing, vision and strategy. Maybe they're missing effective communication, or, emotional intelligence, adaptability, resilience. There's all these different leadership traits that could be missing, but what is the root cause of the challenge that's creating the maybe dysfunction or ineffectiveness in their particular organization?
This is so good. As you're sharing this, I'm sitting there thinking like it's like a doctor. You're going to come in and you're going to, hey, let's just see what's going on here. I love the word culture audit. Like, let's just really assess the situations. What are you doing internally? Let's talk to some people. I love that. I remember years ago when I was leading a company, and the corporate organization kind of did something similar. But I remember we had several different offices around the country, and I was leading the Dallas office. But I remember early on, the gentleman coming in. I'm the general manager, and he's going to come in. So we talk first. And I remember the trust. There wasn't a trust factor for me. I was kind of like, what's going on here? Like, is he trying to figure out if I'm the guy for the job or what's happening? And I did give you some questions ahead of time, but I was thinking about this as you shared that. How do you, I don't know, how do you develop trust? Because I mean, you're an outsider. You're going to come in, you're going to do an audit, you're going to say, "Hey, here's what I found." But for people to really open up, how do you develop trust?
What's interesting is I actually just was talking to a client of mine last week, and we were talking about some things. And I asked her, I said, "What was really the pain point, of when you decided you need external help, and what made you call me?
Yeah.
Why'd you call me?" And we had worked together in the past. And one of the things she said, "You are so authentic
Mm.
and you have such deep empathy that you're easy to trust. And I knew that you coming in and talking to our leaders, they would trust you." And it's not always that easy, but that was a compliment and that felt really good.
Yes.
But one of the things that I've done in not all of the engagements, but a lot of the engagements, is I'll do like an offsite with the group, or attend a meeting that they're just as a outside person, but as a friend. And I just come in and get to know people. One of the early on engagements that I did, maybe it's still popular, but that axe throwing,
Mm.
this client that I was getting ready to engage in, they do these quarterly all company, little events. And so they did this axe throwing. And so I said, hey, let me come to that axe throwing and get to know people. And so I didn't get to know everybody, but I had a chance to have some one on one conversations
Mm,
with some of their team and just in a casual environment, build that trust. And so I think that in itself helps me build the trust. And then when I get into the organizations, the first thing that we work on is how much do you trust one another?
mm,
And I worked with a small team that had worked together for years. I mean, like 10 years. They'd worked together, they knew each other, they did, parties together, outings, they worked together all the time. And so we were in the midst of kind of the initial stage of this engagement. And we started talking about trust. How much do you trust one another?
mm.
And it was, I trust, them with my kids. If something was wrong, they could pick up my kids or come to my house or, all of these personal relationship levels of trust. And I said, okay, tell me about your projects. Tell me about work. And they just shut down. And they're
Mm,
like, there is no way I trust that person with my project plan.
mm.
I'm the subject matter expert and I'm going to run this and I don't need their help. I don't need their advice. And breaking that down is one of the first things that we need to do. I'm not asking you to give somebody your project plan,
Mm.
but when you need help, you make a mistake, you want an outside perspective, having that vulnerability based trust to go to somebody else and ask their advice, ask their input. We are hired and stay in our roles because we're subject matter experts, and we don't want to damage that.
Mm.
And so, not knowing something or asking someone for advice or maybe admitting a mistake we made is not easy. That doesn't come natural because we're supposed to be, again, the subject matter expert. So, how do we build that trust in relationships that we can ask others for help, their opinion?
Yeah, I mean, that's trust is all about building relationships, and it's so hard. I love, though, the idea of the axe throwing, going in and getting people away from the computer, away from the cubicle, away from the office, and into that building relationship zone for you to do that. So that's so good. I appreciate you sharing that. I know that a lot of people on the listing right now is going to really benefit from that. So one of the things I like to ask guests whenever they're doing great work, they're doing meaningful work, they're doing purposeful work like what you're doing, is what success looks like. Because a lot of times we do a lot of different things, but the one thing that everybody wants to know is, hey, what's that ROI or what's that, outcome at the end of the day? But for you, whenever you're coming in and helping a team, I don't know, how do you define success? How do you know what that looks like?
Well, what I think is interesting is I think success is different for every organization and for every individual.
Mm,
And so there's going to be very specific goals that we need to accomplish in an engagement. There are specific goals that each leader wants to accomplish to deliver the results. You reference the ROI. One of the things I talk about, and I have a program that is leadership ROI.
mm.
And the leadership ROI is actually ripples of influence.
Ripples
Be-
of influence. Say that one more time. I love that.
Leadership ripples of influence.
Fantastic.
We talked a little bit earlier about influence being why people follow you a lot of times. And so what are you doing as a leader that is influential, that is impacting others? And there's going to be the very tangible, tactical, results oriented components of it. But when I think about success and I work with leaders on what success looks like to them, I actually have them go through a process that is going to help define it very personal for them. Because unfortunately, what happens in today's, you know, world, just the busy, hectic world, first of all, everybody says, okay, we need to do it all. And we need to do it all in order to be successful. And so the leaders that I work with, I have them peel back what is all for you, because that's all that matters. It doesn't matter what all is for, Bob or Barbara down the street. What is all for you? Yes, you
Mm.
have results that you have to deliver in the role that you're in. But when you're thinking about the success, and when you're your, 90-year-old person and you're looking back on your leadership legacy, what does that success look like for you? And you mentioned earlier the designing your leadership journey. And
Yes.
that's really where that comes in,
Hmm.
is because everybody's journey is not the same. And so I want to help leaders design their leadership journey for the success, the version of success that they desire in order to live and leave a legacy.
This is so good. Oh my goodness. Oh, Tenice, I have a full page of notes here. I could talk to you about this all day long. I do want to ask you, um, I don't know, someone that they want to start developing their people, kind of like you back in the day. You're talking to chief learning officer and said, "Hey, we need to get in front of this." You share one tip what someone might do to maybe get started. Maybe they don't really have anything internally, and they just want to crack the book open and kind of do something, kind of get started. Any tips around there?
I think the first one is have the courage and the confidence to explore the things that you're interested in.
Oh,
So by doing that, you can go back to the mentors that we talked about earlier,
mm-hmm.
asking questions,
Okay.
figuring out different things, but having the confidence and the courage to dive in and explore, even if it is on, a side gig that you're doing, or just a little bit to tip your toe in the water to see if it really is something that works for you. And I look at that and I say, okay, if you're testing anything, and I go whether it's something that you're not sure you want to do, but you're looking into, or if it's your professional or personal goals, then you have to track it. You have to journal. And when I think about journaling, I want people to make it simple. You may have a lot of different topics that you're journaling about in order to keep track of it. But I want you to ask yourself three questions, and that's it. What's working? What's not working? And how can I do it differently?
Mm.
What's working? What's not working? And how can I do it differently? And you continually look at the answers to those questions and make sure that you keep doing the things that are working, you stop doing the things that are not working, and you're always trying things different in order to progress towards that goal or that success.
I love this. Courage and confidence to explore. That's where it starts. Oh my goodness, this has been so good. Okay, Denise, I want to go to it's time to accelerate. But before we do that, I want to ask you one question. You've given a lot of great advice around leadership, developing leaders, developing teams, all of that. Was there ever any advice that you were given along your journey? It could have been early on or, later in your career. It was just such good advice. You just find yourself sharing that with others.
Probably the one thing that stands out, and we've kind of touched on and danced around this
Mhm.
conversation throughout our entire talk here. But I want you as a leader to think about your board of directors.
Hmm.
Who is your board of directors that's helping you grow both personally and professionally? And on that board of directors, you need people who are maybe like minded, who understand what you're doing and where you're trying to get. But you also need people who are going to challenge your thinking, be a little bit more tough love
Mm.
potentially. But you need that board of directors to get feedback from, again, in order to know how best to move forward. And that board of directors, I think everyone should have one. And it may not, just like any board of directors, not everybody stays on it for life. You may change them in and out, but having the right people helping you grow and develop as you grow both personally and professionally.
Okay, write that down, folks. Board of directors. Who's on your board of directors? I want to encourage you to make sure that you start filling some names in. Let people know, hey, you're on my board of directors, and just have those conversations. This has been so good, Denise. Oh, hey, let's shift to it's time to accelerate. I'm just going to give you some, I don't know, just some. We'll go through some fun facts here. First and foremost, I'm curious, like, what are you listening to when it comes to podcasts, or maybe it's a book, Audible? Anything stand out?
I listen to Audible a
Uh-huh.
lot
Yeah.
because I don't enjoy just reading. It's just not me. It's not my thing. I figured that out. So I do listen to Audible. I will listen to business books kind of over and over. I'm a
Yeah.
leadership kind of junkie like that. The most recent book that I listened to, well, there's a couple, but the most recent book that I listened to that was really helpful was Who Not How by
Hmm.
Dan Sullivan.
Hmm.
And where it was really helpful in my business is making sure that I have the right who's supporting what needs to be done, the experts that are delivering, the different aspects of the business and making sure that that who, not how is a great aspect. So that was one of my most recents.
I love that. I will put the link in the show notes so the listeners can click on that link and also pick a copy of that. That's fantastic. I love that. I'm going to do that as well. I've not read that. In my book, Life and Leadership Lane, I have a chapter called "Great Leaders Are Grateful Leaders." I'm curious, like, what are you grateful for?
I am so grateful. And first and foremost, I'm grateful for my family and my health.
Hmm.
I wouldn't be here today without the support of my family. And so I'm very grateful for my family and healthy. I'm healthy and just grateful for being able to do what I love to do.
Hmm. Yeah, it feels good, doesn't it? When
Yeah, it
you are
does.
in your lane, and you're definitely in your lane. Okay, so here we are. We're coming up the end of the first quarter. What are you most looking forward to? Is there anything that stands out? There was something that called the Masogi. I heard Jesse Itzler talk about that. It's like this one big thing for your year. Do you have anything like a one big thing coming up? It could be, I don't know, it could be family trip. It could be anything.
This is the year of growth for Wehmeyer Leadership Coaching. I am looking at really accelerating both my client list as well as my team. And so, growth in my business is what 2025 is all about. So, that's where I'm focusing this year.
I love that. And I'm sure growing your business also means growing great relationships. So that's so fantastic. Okay, here's my last question. Probably my funnest question, Denise. Denise, 10 years older, is around the corner and she's knocking at your door, and you're going to go answer that door. What's she going to say to you?
She's going to say, stop waiting, take action, and dream bigger. Those will
That's
be the two things.
inspiring. Dream bigger. I love the take action part. Oh my goodness. Dream bigger. This has been so much fun, Denise. I told you the time would just fly by.
It
For
did.
those who listen today, or maybe they're watching on YouTube, and they said, you know what? I love what Denise said about this. I want to follow her, or I want to connect with her. I have some questions. How is the best way for someone to connect with you?
So the best way is probably LinkedIn.
Okay.
So I'm on LinkedIn, Tenice Wehmeyer. I don't think there's another one out there. So I'm lucky, fortunate to have that name to some degree. And you can follow me and connect with me on LinkedIn. Also on YouTube. So I have a YouTube channel. And then my website. My website is wehmeyercoaching.com. And so you can follow me there. You can click a link to schedule time for us to connect and those are the main places.
And I'll put all of those links in the show notes so people can just click on those links. And if you reach out and you connect with Tenice, be sure and let her know, hey, I heard you on Life in the Leadership Lane. I love what you said about this. I love the three questions or something that made impact, and that will make that connection much, much better. So, Tenice, I appreciate you so much for coming on the show, sharing your wisdom. I've enjoyed like watching your journey over the past 10 plus years, and I can't wait to see what's ahead. So, thank you again. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too, Bruce. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks.